My brother has 3 kids from a previous marriage who feel less than because their dad favorites their half-sister more and takes only her on their vacations. So I have been including them on my trips to make up for it. But now my brother can't afford to go on vacations anymore and asked me to start taking the spoiled girl with me. My family, from the outside, looked like any other. My parents worked steadily, and the children grew up in a house that was neither cramped nor comfortable, just enough. But cracks appeared very early on, only no one wanted to name them. I lived with my older brother, Jason, until the day he decided to get married. After that, I went abroad for work, carrying the belief that I was leaving to grow up, not to run away from anything. Jason was much older than I, and had always been soft-hearted. He tended to give in, stay silent, and often convinced himself that things would work out in the end. When he brought Micah home to meet the family, everyone felt the unease immediately, even though no one said it out loud. I still remember my mother's expression, worried yet carefully polite, as if she were standing in front of a door she knew would be hard to close once opened. Micah was the kind of woman people did not easily forget. She was messy, drank often, loved parties, laughed loudly, and never hesitated to put herself on display. But there was something strangely magnetic about her. She knew how to draw attention, how to use charm to cover the darker parts of herself. Jason, to put it gently, was not clear-headed enough to see what he was being pulled into. The family warned him again and again. My father talked about responsibility. My mother talked about the future. I talked about the price he might have to pay. Jason listened, nodded, and still married Micah. He always had the same familiar reason, that he believed people would change once they had a family, once they had children. They quickly had 3 kids. Ethan was born first, then Lucas, and finally Lily. When Ethan was 15, Lucas was 13, and Lily was 10, I looked back and saw a childhood tied to far too many silences. I was far away, and only knew the family through brief phone calls. There were nights when Jason called me late, his voice tired, saying he was trying. He said Micah was not a bad person, just difficult to live with. He said the kids were fine. I listened, uneasy, but told myself that I was not there, and maybe I was overthinking. When I came home to visit, I saw that Ethan was quieter than a boy his age should be. Lucas often stayed behind his older brother, and Lily spoke little, her eyes always guarded. I asked Jason, and he said the kids were just sensitive. I asked Mike, and she laughed, said kids were like that, then poured herself another drink. That marriage dragged on in exhaustion, not through explosive fights, but through slow erosion. Jason spoke less and less. Micah lived more and more on her own terms. The 3 children learned how to manage by themselves, to play among themselves, and to stay away from moments when the adults were unhappy. Then one day, Jason called me, his voice rough. He said everything was over. He and Micah were getting a divorce. I was not surprised, but I still felt a sharp, unfamiliar ache. I thought of Ethan, Lucas, and Lily, and thought that maybe, at last, they would be able to breathe a little easier. Jason said he had done everything he could. He said no one was completely at fault. He said he only wanted things to be calm so the children could grow up. I listened and did not argue. There are times when silence is the only choice if you do not want to hurt someone any further. I thought that was the lowest point of it all. A marriage falling apart. 3 children caught in the middle. A man worn down. I believed that after hitting bottom, people would know to stop, to be more careful with the decisions that came next. Until Jason told me, very calmly, that he was about to get married again, and that it would happen very soon. After the divorce, the 3 children chose to stay with their mother. Even though the court allowed Jason to take custody of one child, Ethan, Lucas, and Lily still wanted to remain because they were used to their old environment. Jason respected that decision, saying the kids were old enough to choose for themselves. Hearing this, I felt somewhat relieved, thinking that at least things were being handled slowly and with consideration. That slowness did not last long. Just a few months later, Jason called me and said he had met someone new and was about to get married. The woman's name was Jenny. I froze because everything was happening too fast. The old cracks had not even had time to close, and he was already building a new frame, as if he were afraid of being alone for too long. Jenny was completely different from Micah. She was not loud or showy. She spoke carefully and with restraint. She was educated, had a stable job, and carried herself like someone in control of her life. The first time I met her, I thought Jason had finally chosen someone more suited to him. But after spending a little more time around them, I began to notice signs that made me uneasy. Jason spoke less when Jenny was present. He looked at her before answering questions. The stories he told often stopped halfway, as if he were censoring himself. I realized he weighed every word and reaction, as though he were afraid of doing something wrong. Jenny never raised her voice or showed harshness. She only needed to stay silent at the right moments, And that silence was enough for Jason to know what he should do. I once thought that his compliance came from a desire to make this marriage last longer. But the sense of unease inside me remained strong. They had a child together named Daisy, who was 9 at the time. Jason talked about her with clear pride. He said Daisy was well-behaved, smart, and more like Jenny. I listened and smiled, yet something still felt off. Perhaps it was because in his stories, the other 3 children were barely mentioned. During that time, Ethan, Lucas, and Lily were still living with their mother. Micah's health was getting worse, and her illness made daily life increasingly difficult. I received the news through broken phone calls. Micah's voice sometimes clear, sometimes exhausted. Jason tried to juggle caring for his children and managing his new family, but I understood that eventually everything would reach a point where a choice had to be made. When Jason told me that he would bring all 3 children to live with him and Jenny, I felt both relieved and worried. Relieved because the kids would have adults around them. Worried because I was not sure whether that new house was truly ready to receive them. I asked what Jenny thought. Jason answered for her, saying that Jenny understood and sympathized, that she would try to adjust to her new role. The way he spoke made me realize the decision had been approved, but not necessarily born from deep agreement. On the day the 3 children moved in, I was there. Ethan carried old bags, his face serious. Lucas followed quietly behind. Lily clutched her brother's hand, looking around the unfamiliar house. Daisy stood next to Jenny, hugging a new stuffed animal, her eyes curious. Jason tried to create a cheerful mood, talking about how everyone would be a family. Jenny smiled and nodded, but I could clearly see the stiffness in every movement. She only led Daisy to see her room first, leaving the 3 children standing behind with Jason. I stood there watching, feeling a heavy weight settle in my chest. No one said it out loud, but a line had been drawn from the very first moment. Small things began to surface in the days that followed. Meals were prepared according to Daisy's habits. The daily routine revolved around her. Ethan and Lucas learned to manage on their own. Lily grew quieter than before. Jason told me that everything needed time. Jenny said the kids would get used to it. I told myself I was overthinking, that blending a family always requires adjustment. But the more I listened, the clearer one thing became. In that house, there were people who were given priority, and people who had to learn how to step back. I left with a sense of unease that would not fade. I had no idea that from the moment the 3 children stepped into that house, 2 sides had already formed clearly, and that division would soon reveal itself in a way I could not ignore. I began to notice the difference through very small stories. Jason would show off photos from trips, pictures of him, Jenny, and Daisy in places far from home. He talked about those trips lightly, as if they were the most natural thing in the world. I listened and waited. Waited for a detail about Ethan, Lucas, or Lily. But the story always ended with Daisy. Those trips kept happening regularly. Each time Jason mentioned one, I found myself wondering where the other 3 kids were. The answer was usually that they were at home, or at a friend's place, or managing on their own. The way he said it made me feel as though they had already gotten used to being left out. I started to feel uneasy, but still did not think I had enough reason to speak up. I remember the night Lily sent me a photo of the 3 siblings' dinner. 3 bowls were placed close together on the table, with simple food. She did not say anything else. I looked at the picture and tried to convince myself it was just an ordinary evening. That kids sometimes like simple meals. But the sense of unease did not leave me. Then I received a decision from my supervisor, asking me to return to the US for work for a while. I was happy because I would get to see my family again. I thought of the kids first. I imagined Ethan's face when he heard the news. I pictured Lucas asking me all sorts of questions. I hoped Lily would smile, the smile I had not seen through a screen in a long time. I called them that same evening. Ethan answered, his voice more mature than his age. I heard Lucas in the background, quietly asking who was calling. Lily stayed silent, only greeting me very softly. I told them I was coming home, that we would see each other soon. I waited for excitement, for a happy reaction. The silence that followed for a few seconds caught me off guard. Then Lily spoke. Her voice trembled, as if she were trying to stay calm. She spoke very slowly, each word dropping heavily. Lily said it had been 2 days, and the 3 of them had only eaten instant noodles. She said Ethan had run out of money. She said he did not dare ask their dad. I froze. I asked why they had not asked. Lily said their dad was busy, that he was out on a trip. She did not complain, she only told the story. That way of telling hurt more than any accusation. I asked Ethan if he was okay. He said everything was fine, that they could take care of themselves. That voice sent a chill through me. I hung up the phone, my hands still shaking. I thought of Jason, of the trips, of the way he talked about them. I put the pieces together and saw a very clear picture. When Daisy went on trips, the other three stayed home. When Daisy was prioritized, the basic needs of the others were pushed aside. I called Jason right away. He answered cheerfully. I asked where he was. He said he was on his way back from a short trip. I asked about the kids. He said they were fine, that they were old enough to handle things themselves. The way he answered made my throat tighten. I told him Lily had just talked about eating noodles for 2 days. Jason was silent for a moment, then said it was a small thing. He said kids sometimes like noodles. He said I was worrying too much. I listened and realized that he did not understand, or did not want to understand. That night, I could not sleep. I thought about my own childhood, about the times I had leaned on my brother. I wondered when Ethan had learned to stay silent, how Lucas had grown used to standing behind, and I thought of Lily, the youngest of the three, learning how to shrink herself down. The trips kept going. Photos were still being posted. Daisy appeared in every frame, bright, held close, given attention. The other three children faded out of the family narrative, as if they had never existed. I began to understand something deeply unsettling. This abandonment was not a sudden decision, but a habit that had taken shape. It repeated long enough to become normal for the people involved. And in that moment, I knew I could no longer stay on the sidelines. I came home late one afternoon. After getting my work settled, the first thing I did was call Jason and tell him I wanted to take the kids to stay at my place for a few days. Jason agreed fairly quickly, his tone relaxed, as if it were a completely ordinary request. I did not hear Jenny say anything on the other end of the line, but at the time, I did not think much of it. I drove over to his house. Ethan and Lucas were already waiting on the porch. Ethan carried an old backpack, and Lucas stayed close by his brother's side. Lily came out last, her hand gripping the strap of her bag, her eyes fixed on the ground. I bent down and asked if she was happy, and Lily gave a very slight nod. I reached out toward Daisy and asked if she wanted to come along with her brothers and sister to stay at her aunt's place. Daisy stood next to Jenny and shook her head. She said clearly, without hesitation, that she was not going. Then she looked at me and said something that made me freeze, that she was not on the same level as those people. Jenny did not scold her, and Jason did not react. The air hardened for a few seconds. I could hear my own heartbeat, and the three children stood still, as if they were already used to this. I did not know what to say in that moment. I only nodded and told Daisy that if she did not want to go, that was fine. I turned to the kids, and motioned for them to get into the car. When the car door closed, I saw Lily lower her head very far. Ethan stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. Lucas sat quietly, his hands clasped together. On the way back, no one spoke. I did not ask right away. I waited until we got home, when the three kids were sitting around the kitchen table, each holding a glass of water. I told them they could stay as long as they liked. I said that if there was anything they wanted to tell me, I would listen. Ethan spoke first. He said that things had been like this for a long time. He said that when Daisy bought new things, they were told the old ones were still good enough. When Daisy was taken out to eat, they were told that eating at home was cheaper. Ethan spoke in a flat voice, as if he were reciting a familiar list. Lucas continued. He talked about skipped meals. There were evenings when Jenny cooked for Jason and Daisy first, then said the kids should take care of their own meals. Lucas said that some days he and Ethan split a pack of noodles so Lily could eat first. When I asked why they did not tell their dad, Lucas stayed silent for a long time, then said their dad was busy, and that it would put him in a difficult position if they made a fuss. I looked at Lily. She sat, curled up on her chair, both hands gripping the hem of her shirt. I asked if she wanted to say anything. Lily shook her head. I did not push. I turned back to the boys and asked about the trips. Ethan said that whenever the family traveled, they were usually informed very late. By the time they knew, everything had already been arranged. Ethan said they were used to it. Each word landed heavily, so heavy that I had to take a deep breath to stay calm. I thought about the times Jason had said everything was fine. I thought about Jenny, about the way she smiled and said the kids would get used to it. I began to question everything I had believed. I asked about Daisy. Ethan said Daisy often showed off the things she had. Lucas said Daisy liked to say that their parents loved her more. When I asked whether Daisy said those things in front of adults, both of them shook their heads. Ethan said Daisy knew when to stay quiet. That sentence sent a chill down my spine. I looked back at Lily again. I told her she did not have to speak if she was not ready. Lily lifted her head, her eyes red and swollen. She spoke very softly, saying there were things she had not told yet. Her voice trembled, as if one more sentence would make her break down in tears. I placed my hand on the table and told her she was safe here. I said that whatever she said would not make anyone angry. Lily looked at me for a long time, then lowered her head again. She said she was scared. I asked what she was afraid of. Lily did not answer right away. The kitchen was so quiet I could clearly hear the wall clock. Ethan and Lucas watched Lily, their expressions tense. I knew that what Lily was about to say would send everything in a different direction. And I also knew that once she spoke, I would not be able to go back to how things were before. Lily burst into tears just as I set the glass of water down in front of her. The crying was not loud, but tightly held back, as if she had been keeping it in for far too long. Lily said she had often been falsely blamed by Daisy. She said there were times when she was just standing still, and was accused of starting trouble. Once, Daisy pushed her down, then turned around and said Lily had hit her first. The adults heard that and scolded Lily, telling her she was causing chaos in the house. Lily told the story in broken phrases. She said there were times she was hit, not hard, but enough to make her afraid. She said that every time she tried to explain, Jenny would look at Jason, and then everything would stop there. Lily said that after those moments, she would be reminded that she had to give in, had to know her place, had to understand that Daisy was younger. I asked Lily if she had told her dad. She shook her head, tears falling onto her hands. Lily said her dad was tired, that he often said everything would be fine. She said that if she talked more, her dad would be sad, and then he would argue with Jenny again. Lily said she was afraid of those evenings when the whole house went quiet, afraid of the feeling that she was the reason. I pulled Lily into my arms. She was thinner than I remembered. I could feel her shoulders trembling with each breath. In that moment, I understood that what Lily was carrying was not just a few scoldings. It was the feeling of being doubted, pushed aside, and taught to stay silent so everything could look peaceful. Ethan and Lucas sat silently beside us. Ethan looked at me, his eyes hardening. He said they had gotten used to protecting Lily in their own way. He said there were days when he and Lucas stayed closer to her than usual, just so she would not be alone. The way Ethan said it made my chest ache, because that was an adult's responsibility, not something a 15-year-old should bear. I took a deep breath and tried to keep my voice steady. I told them that what they had shared was not something small. I said Lily had done nothing wrong by speaking up. Lily looked at me, her eyes red, as if testing whether my words were real. I nodded and held her hand tightly. That night, after the kids had fallen asleep, I sat alone for a long time. I thought about the past years, about the physical distance that had made me believe the reassurances. I thought about Jason, about the way he avoided conflict, about how he had chosen surface-level calm instead of facing the truth. I thought about Jenny, about her deliberate silence. The next morning, I told the kids that I wanted to do something for them. I talked about a trip, nothing fancy, just a few days to breathe, to play, to eat meals without having to be careful. Ethan looked at me for a long time, then asked if it was really okay. Lucas asked whether they needed their dad's permission. Lily did not ask anything. She just looked at me. Her eyes mixed with hope and fear. I said I would handle it. I said this trip was for the three of them. I saw Ethan let out a very soft breath. Lucas smiled for the first time since I came back. Lily squeezed my hand without saying a word. That moment made me more certain of my decision. I started making plans. I chose a time that fit the kids' school schedules. I thought about quiet places, places where they could simply be themselves. I did not tell Jason right away. I wanted everything to be clear before speaking, so the conversation would not turn into a negotiation. On the day I called Jason, his voice was cheerful as usual. I talked about the trip and said I wanted to take Ethan, Lucas, and Lily away for a few days. Jason was silent for a moment, then asked about Daisy. I replied that this trip was only for the three kids. Jason said Daisy should go too. He said she would be sad if she were left behind. He said Jenny would not be happy. I listened and felt a frightening sense of familiarity in the way he framed the issue. I said I wanted this trip to be for the three children who had endured so much. Jason stayed silent even longer. Then he said I should take Daisy along, that it would be fairer that way. I felt my heart pounding. I thought of Lily, of the tears from the night before. I thought of Ethan and Lucas, of how they had learned to endure. For the first time, I said one word to Jason, clearly and without going around it. I said, no. I told Jason that I needed to see him in person. My voice could no longer keep its usual gentleness. I told him we had to talk things through clearly. Jason was silent for a few seconds, then agreed. He said I could come over, and everyone was there. The way he answered made it clear he did not think this would be a difficult conversation. When I stepped into the house, Daisy was sitting in the middle of the living room. She was watching TV, her feet up on the chair, food in her hand. Jenny sat beside her, smiling at the child, occasionally reminding Daisy to eat more slowly. Jason stood nearby, silent, his eyes always on her. I said hello, Jenny replied politely. Jason nodded, and the atmosphere seemed normal. Just a few minutes later, Daisy spilled water on the floor. She frowned and said the table was in the wrong place. Jenny stood up, wiped the water, said it was fine, then looked to Jason as if for confirmation. Jason smiled and said she did not do it on purpose. I stood there and saw something very clearly. Every reaction revolved around soothing Daisy. I asked about Ethan, Lucas, and Lily. Jenny said they were in their rooms, doing homework on their own. I asked if they should be called out to say hello. Jenny shook her head and said to let them have some quiet. Daisy glanced at me and said the others were always noisy. Jenny did not correct her, and Jason said nothing. I did not dance around it. I told Jason directly that he was a fool. I said he did not know how to protect his own children. The room went completely silent. Jenny looked at me, her eyes turning cold. Jason frowned and asked what I was talking about. I said he was seeing everything, but choosing to look away. Jenny reacted first. She said I was exaggerating. She said Daisy was just a child, that she was sensitive and needed protection. She said the other three were older and should know how to give in. Jason nodded along to every sentence, as if those words made it easier for him to breathe. I pointed toward the inner rooms. I asked him if he knew how Lily had cried. I asked if he knew how the kids handled their meals on some nights. Jason avoided my eyes. He said everything was fine. He said the kids did not complain. He said if there were a serious problem, he would have known. Daisy cut in, saying the others caused trouble. She said her parents always had to clean up after them. Jenny placed a hand on Daisy's shoulder and told her she did not need to say more. But the way she looked at the child showed agreement. Jason looked at his daughter and said nothing. I asked Jason if he had ever sat down and asked his children how they felt. He said he was busy. He said he did not want to create more tension in the house. He said keeping the peace was the most important thing. I listened and felt my heart grow heavy. I told him that this peace was being bought with his children's silence. I said Ethan had learned not to ask for anything. Lucas had learned to stay behind. Lily had learned to take the blame even when she had done nothing wrong. I said that was not okay. Jenny pushed back. She said I did not live there, and did not understand the pressure of a large family. She said I was biased because I only listened to children. I looked at her and realized that everything I said was being seen as unnecessary interference. Jason finally spoke, but his voice had weakened. He said he was trying his best. He said he did not want another marriage to fail. He said he could not bear constant arguments. I listened and understood one thing very clearly. He was more afraid of losing Jenny than of hurting his own children. I stood up and walked to the door of the room where the three kids were. I did not go inside. I knew that if I opened that door, everything would become even more uncomfortable. I turned back to Jason and told him that he could choose silence to keep his household calm, but that silence was hurting his own children every single day. Jason did not answer. He looked down at the floor, his hands clasped together. Jenny pulled Daisy closer to her, as if to assert the child's place. That image burned into my memory, clearer than any words. When I left the house, I knew I had seen the truth, not because of what Jenny did, but because of what Jason failed to do. His silence was not neutral, it was a choice, and that choice was leaving wounds his children would carry for a very long time. I went back to Jason's house after the conversation the other day, this time with no intention of probing gently or holding back. I told him directly that I had heard everything from Ethan, Lucas, and Lily. I went through each detail, the skipped meals, the constant comparisons, the evenings the kids were left to manage on their own in silence. I said I would not keep covering for them anymore if nothing changed. Jason sat still, his hands resting on his knees, his eyes fixed on the floor. I waited for a response, for a question, for some kind of rebuttal. But he only sighed and said I was making things more complicated. He said kids tend to exaggerate, and that I had only heard one side of the story. The way he spoke made me understand that denial had become his habit, a way to protect himself. Jenny stood up quickly. She raised her voice, sharp and rapid. She said I always took the side of those children. She said I had never understood her pressure, had never lived in this house, had never had to balance everything. She said I was interfering in someone else's family without knowing my limits. I looked at Jenny and realized her anger was not new. It had been building for a long time, waiting for a reason to explode. She said the other three kids always caused trouble, that Daisy was the one who truly needed protection. She said I was biased because I did not live with them. I listened to every word and saw one thing clearly. In the way Jenny saw the world, those three children had never been the center that needed to be heard. I turned to Jason and asked if he agreed with what Jenny had just said. He looked up, his eyes uncertain. He said he understood both sides. He said he did not want to choose sides. That sentence sent a chill through me. I told him that silence at a moment like this was not neutral. I told him it was a choice. Jenny cut in. saying I was putting Jason in an impossible position. She said he had already endured enough pressure. She said I should not force him to stand in the middle. I looked at Jason and saw him lower his head. In that moment, I understood his fear more clearly than ever. He was afraid of conflict. He was afraid of losing Jenny. And because of that fear, he was willing to let his children bear the cost. I told Jason that his children were learning to stay silent because of him. I said Ethan was learning not to ask for anything. Lucas was learning to give in too much. Lily was learning to apologize even when she had done nothing wrong. I asked him if that was truly what he wanted for his children. Jason did not answer right away. He said he was trying to hold this family together. He said he could not endure another collapse. I listened and understood that in his mind, this family only existed as long as Jenny was satisfied. His children came after that. Jenny added that if I kept interfering, things would only get worse. She said I was tearing their family apart. I looked at her and said calmly that this family had been cracked for a long time. I said that the damage was not caused by me pointing it out, but by the way they treated the children who had no voice. The air in the room grew heavy. Daisy sat in a corner, looking back and forth between the adults, her expression confused. I did not say anything more about her. I knew the problem was not Daisy. It lay in the decisions made by the adults in that house. I stood up and said I had said everything that needed to be said. I said I would no longer wait for vague change. I said that if they continued like this, I would do my part. I would stand with the children who had endured for far too long. Jason asked what I intended to do. I looked at him and said I would support and protect Ethan, Lucas, and Lily, in whatever way I could. I said I would not let them keep managing in silence. I said that if this changed the shape of this family relationship, I accepted that. Jenny let out a short, cold laugh. She said I was turning myself into a disruptor. Jason looked at me, his eyes filled with confusion and fear. I knew that from this moment on, nothing would be the same. And I also knew that my decision had just opened a path whose end I could not yet see. After that confrontation, I continued to support the family in whatever ways I could. I did not cut off contact right away, nor did I rush into new arguments. I kept enough distance to observe, enough to avoid being pulled back into the old cycle. I no longer believed that time would automatically make things better. I had seen too clearly that some problems exist not because they are too difficult to solve, but because adults choose to avoid them. I began to reorganize what I could do for Ethan, Lucas, and Lily. Not through grand promises, but through very concrete actions. Regular phone calls. Clear, transparent financial support. Time spent together so they would know there was always someone ready to listen. No matter how uncomfortable the story might be. Jason did not ask further about my decision. He kept a cautious distance, as if afraid of crossing a new boundary. I did not blame him at the time. I understood that change always frightens people, especially when it forces them to face things they have avoided for years. Jenny, on the other hand, grew colder. She remained polite, but the distance showed clearly in every word. I paid more attention to Daisy, not to accuse her, but to observe. She was not bad in the way adults often label children. Daisy was simply used to everything revolving around her. She grew up in an environment where the lines between right and wrong were bent by adult emotions. I realized that if no one stopped it, Daisy would eventually carry those distortions with her into life. I came to understand that no child is born bad. Harmful behavior is often the result of how adults raise, indulge, or neglect them. When one child is placed too high, other children are pushed lower. And when that pattern repeats long enough, everyone is hurting in different ways. Ethan gradually became more open when talking to me. He no longer hid his exhaustion behind short answers. Lucas began asking me about things that seemed small, like choosing a school or making plans for the future. Lily was still the quietest, but she no longer shrank back when talking about her feelings. I realized that children who lack parental protection often learn to grow up too early. They learn to read adults' moods, to make themselves smaller so as not to be a burden. Those lessons help them survive, but they also leave wounds that are slow to heal. I had seen those wounds in Lily's eyes, in Ethan's excessive caution, in Lucas's restraint. There were times when I asked myself whether I had done the right thing. I wondered if standing with the kids had made things worse in the short term. But then I remembered the moment Lily cried in my kitchen, remembered the way Ethan said they were used to it. I knew that silence was the most damaging choice of all. My family did not become better after those decisions. The relationship between Jason and me changed in a way that could not return to what it once was. I accepted that. I understood that some relationships must pay a price in order to protect things that matter more. I do not dare say that I saved anyone. I only know that I did what my conscience would not allow me to ignore. This story has no winner. No one walks away feeling whole. There are only children trying to grow up in the middle of adults' wrong choices. And I also understand that this journey is not over. The decisions I make today will lead to other consequences down the line. I do not yet know what I will have to face next, but I know one thing for certain. I will not go back to being a bystander, no matter how complicated the road ahead may be. If you are listening to this story, perhaps somewhere around you, here are also children quietly enduring their own pain. Sometimes, all they need is one person willing to listen, one person brave enough to stand with them when everyone else chooses to turn away. Thank you for following my story. If you see yourself in it, please share it so this story can reach more people. Do not forget to follow the channel to hear more everyday stories, where each experience can help us understand one another and treat each other better.